Hello and welcome to the Executive Edge podcast. I'm here today with Bill Bryant, who worked with us on the executive coaching side of our business at Levitise. And Bill has an absolutely fascinating story. He came to us when he was 61 years old, and his career came to rather an abrupt end or unexpected for him. And he hadn't quite worked out what his retirement plan, what he was going to do, where he was going to live, what kind of income he wanted coming in, and really he was looking to find his ikigai, his one north, his sort of guiding light. And I think this is a really, really important story because many people, particularly when they hit that 50 age, they've been through life and academia, university and career and making money, but never really sat down and thought about what do they really want out of life. And if you've ever had those thoughts like, what's it all about and what do I do from sort of 65 plus, then this is going to be a great episode for you. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Alex. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again. Thanks for coming in. How long are you in town for?
Just for the week. I'm here through Saturday, yes.
Okay, great. So, it's good to see you. So anyway, let's get started. So originally you're from South Africa.
Correct.
And then you've worked for some time in Singapore. So let's start off. How did you get from South Africa to Singapore, and how many countries did you stop off at on the way?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because it was actually not the plan. Some people actively go out to be expats and go and live and work in different countries. I, in fact, took a posting as an interesting foreign experience with a view to go back to South Africa. And 7 countries later, and 25 years later, I'm in Australia now, but was here in Singapore. So yes, it was a somewhat unplanned but very interesting journey nevertheless. And some places I went back to a couple of times. So although there's 7 countries, there's about 14 or 15 moves in there because I did Dubai twice, Indonesia once, Singapore twice,
wow.
China once, Hong Kong twice, Germany twice. I mean, what's the connection? As with always in life, I always believe people will tell you that they planned their career, but I'm always rather skeptical of that because I think you can look back and see that if you took the opportunities when they came, you can probably draw a golden thread. Mine is essentially the chemical industry because even the paper company, they were looking for somebody from the chemical industry and throughout, and even this shipping company predominantly serves the chemical sector. So that's the thing. And they knew me before, so they were looking for somebody from the chemical industry. So that's been the link.
And so did you feel that, you mentioned that there was a golden thread and a lot of people don't have a plan. Did you feel like you had a plan or you were sort of moved around?
No.
Based on the company's demands for you and your time?
Yeah, so what I tried to steer clear of was that it was not entirely based on the company's demand. So even for example, I had moved to Dubai, hadn't been there very long, was asked to go back and head up the Asia Pacific because the chap that was there had now suddenly been recalled to South Africa. And I said, look, I need 2 or 3 weeks to think about this because I felt that you needed to consider why are you doing this? Because if you're just chasing the jobs, I think you can then land up and suddenly think, hang on, what am I actually doing? Why am I here? I don't even like this place.
Yes.
Whereas if you say the opportunity is right and it is a good opportunity, then you move for the right reasons from a career point of view. And then, of course, yes, I've been extremely lucky that I've had a family who have been flexible enough to adapt and adjust as we've gone.
Yeah.
Because that's key.
Yeah. I think you already puts you in a minority, the fact that you said that, why am I doing this? Because I'm not sure that many people do, and they're just looking at the salary in many cases.
Oh, absolutely.
Particularly in the finance industry as well.
Absolutely. And I think in the modern world, I think what you've seen certainly in the petrochemical sector and the broader chemical sector, companies went through a lot of transitions where they then stopped the expat assignments and then suddenly they basically gave you an ultimatum that you're in country X, you need to now make a call. Either you stay on there, but as a local, or you come back to the HQ, and if we have a job for you, great. And many, many companies went through it. And all the reasons business-wise are clear and understood. But then comes the critical question that if you took a punt on a job purely because of a salary, but actually you were a bit kind of circumspect about the country, and now that suddenly becomes the place where you have to make a call whether you stay there, then this can look very tricky from a career point of view. And I some people it worked out well, but I also know a lot of people for whom that that became a real problematic time in their career.
Yeah. Yeah, in that case, it's a gamble if you're not following your heart.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it comes back to a little bit the central theme of even why we're chatting here today is that why are you doing these things? You know, that's more important
Yes.
than what it is that you will do.
Otherwise, you're just going to be chasing money to fill your life with material things and objects.
And the why has to be broad. I mean, it also has to be, why would we as a family go there? What does that mean for us?
Yes.
So if you're with a family, then you definitely need to bring that into the conversation.
And then, so there was a spontaneous kind of awakening, an abrupt exit? Or what happened, and why did you come to see us?
I remember it well. It was February of last year now. It seems like an age ago that I got the dreaded call. We had a weekly call, my boss and I, and he said, "Oh, there's just one more thing." And I said, "Yes." He said, "I want to talk about your position." And I thought, that usually doesn't lead to good things. Could, like, we want to promote you, but I mean, I was already operating at a very high level, so I thought, that probably doesn't sound good. And indeed, he said, "Yeah, I want to do something different. So, I'll give you this year to help me restructure and organize the role, but then by December, we'll need you to move along." And the context is important, that I was very conscious. I was 61, and I had said to myself, all right, by 65, I'd like to move along. That's great. Kids are out of school, kids are out of university, nice time to wrap up. And I was starting to develop ideas of what might I do. And so that's nice because everything's going along well. But then all of a sudden you've got 10 months to do that. And then it's suddenly, well, hang on, that wasn't quite on the plan. And so that caused an enormous amount of anxiety, and it just made me question, well, what actually are you going to do? Because I was going to go and develop all these plans, and all of the stuff would emerge. And then all of a sudden, well, you don't have that luxury of time.
Yeah.
And part of just this sort of shock, I guess, of being told that this is now a finite time and we're making the call and that's where the line is drawn, also kind of sets you back a little, because you get focused too much on that and whether that's fair or not, and you rail against that for a while. But that's not helpful, because you really need to, at that point, really start looking at yourself and what it is that you want to do going forward. And that's what you should spend your time on. But you do. It's human nature to spend time, why this? Why did that happen? This is not fair, not right.
Yes.
And it was around that time that, in actual fact, I'd seen a Facebook post that you put up probably a year prior.
Yes.
So, I mean, the backstory for you and I is that I'd watched you present to the EGN group, and I found your approach and your style and just even your journey of how you'd come out of banking into the industry that you're in. I just thought, that's just incredible that a guy can go from there to here. And you were very compelling in that presentation, and I thought, that's really interesting. So I started following you and paying more attention. And then you put up this Facebook post of a banker who had come, was completely just, done with life. And you showed his health stats and what they looked like. And then he went through the program, went through health and other adjustments. Yes. And then you showed the same health stats after. And that really resonated with me. I thought, I wonder if that's not why I feel all the stress and aches and pains and all the other stuff that's going on in my body, which I wasn't necessarily telling people about. And so then I sort of flagged it again. And I would say, if I have one regret, it's just that I didn't act on it sooner, because I in fact flagged that Facebook post again in about the October of what would then be 2022. But when this then all came together, I said, okay, I knew I needed to go and have that conversation anyway to try and plan for the future. So now I really need to go and have that conversation because I was stuck. And I think my biggest stuck was looking at everything linked to what I was already doing. So every time I did an analysis of what I should do, inevitably I landed up with a version of the job that I was doing. But that's hard when you're 61. You're not that interesting to companies. Yes. Which is a different conversation, and that shouldn't necessarily be the case, but that's the reality of life. Yes. And so that was where I was stuck, and I kept circling on that point. Yeah. And Shivani, bless her soul, was very patient with me in the beginning until she sort of drew a line in the sand and said, come on, we've got to move over.
Yeah.
and got me to get past that point of, because I seemed to be obsessed with, I have to land another corporate job for another 3 years because that was the plan.
Yes.
And I've got to finish that
Yes.
plan. Otherwise, somehow maybe I'm a failure, or I haven't made it, or whatever.
Yes.
And I felt compelled that I need to end on my terms. I need to be able to go and work somewhere. Then I make the decision. Right, I'm now leaving because all my plans are very neatly in place, and then I take the step. And all of this was kind of upside down. So that was why, again, re-looking at that post that you made, it really came home to me that, look, you're going to have to speak to other people. You can't do this on your own, because you keep circling on this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that we don't speak to people about this. I mean, does anyone sit down and have a conversation with a professional about what you want to do with your life? Yeah. We don't do it. We don't do it at school. We go to a career coach. It's not about what do you want to do with your life. It's about what do you want to do as a job.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
what do you want to do to bring an income? It's we just don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be teaching this stuff at school. We should be having check-ins every 5 years as an absolute minimum, you know.
Absolutely.
With coaches, it's crazy.
Absolutely, Alex. And I think that the most important thing is you need somebody who is unemotional but objective, but also interested in you. So they're interested in you enough to want you to help, because that's in fact the job that they do. But they should be above all your emotional stories, which they're all there, they're real and they're compelling, but they're not helpful to the solution. And so that person sits above that and helps you say, yeah, okay, but hang on. I mean, so now you've said a lot of this, but what actually are we going to do? And they help you look forward, because coaching is very much a forward-looking exercise, not a rehashing the past.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you're not emotionally invested, you can be non-judgmental, see people's blind spots, call them out on their BS,
absolutely,
right? and drag them kicking and screaming where they want to be. Although I do feel that, and I've mentioned this in several posts, people need to be aware of there's something going on and willing to do something about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And you were at that stage, which was brilliant, which is why you made such quick progress. If someone's not aware and not willing, they're not going to come and see us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as much as I'd love to accelerate that in people, it's pretty tough. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's, if I just jump ahead. So one of the realities that I have, in fact, now embarked on a coaching career, and it's absolutely true that if the coachee, as they get called, which I find a strange term, but nevertheless, if they are not absolutely interested and willing to engage in the process, there's no magic. You can't force somebody to do something, and that's in any event not what coaching is about. But it's it absolutely critically requires it, and I think it's more to the point of where we were speaking earlier, is that you've got to, if that person's not asking, why am I doing this, what am I trying to do themselves, it's not going to be, it's not an interrogation. Some person says if they ask enough questions, eventually you'll get the answer.
Yes.
That's just not, the person's got to be really interested in the journey and wanting to make it. And then, yes, what helps is the structure that a independent, objective person brings to the thought process, and who can help you, especially as it was in my case, where I was circling around on a certain point that I had, for some reason, locked in this approach. And I thought, this is it. This is where I am. And I just couldn't get past that point. And even when I thought I was being objective, and I'd have, like a good engineer, I'd have spreadsheets. Yeah, but then you would bias the answers so that the spreadsheet gave you the answer. Wow, look at that. I'm supposed to keep doing the job I was supposed to do. Look at that.
Yeah.
This Excel sheet even has the number that says that that's the right thing. And that's clearly not right.
It's funny. I was in a very similar position to you when I was leaving my old job. So we were in financial research, data research. And I was thinking, well, I don't really want to do this anymore. What else do I do? And I was thinking about the other jobs I could do. And I said, well, I could work for Bloomberg or Reuters or Standard & Poor's, right? All financial data and research companies. And I'm like, but there was a structural tension there. There was not a fit, but those were written down. But then I thought, I did this on a spreadsheet, and I put along the top, and I didn't work with a coach. I wish I had. It would have been a lot quicker. But how fun would that be? How much money would it bring in?
Exactly.
Would it be able to live the lifestyle I wanted? What are the travel opportunities, etc., etc.
Exactly.
And then you tick the money box, and then everything else is across. Yeah, so that, I mean, people are stuck in different places, and that's where you were stuck. That the chap you watched on the video, he came from Korea to join a bank in Singapore, and he'd sort of worked for his whole life up to joining this bank he wanted to join. This his dream job, and after he did it for 2 years, he realized it wasn't his dream job, and he had no idea what to do. So he was stuck in a different way. But it's the same thing. It's like not looking at where you're at or where you've come from, but what are we going to do going forward?
So one interesting story linked to the multiple countries and places is that I would share that's linked to what the point you just made is, and if I had any guidance for anybody, I'd say start sooner, like preferably when you're around 50, because I was having these kind of thoughts at that time, but then never acted on them. But I think that you've got to. So I have found that as I've moved around many countries, people say, "Oh, you know about many countries." Yes, but what I think you learn more about is who you are, because if you keep trying to adjust and be local, in the end you're this completely confused person. You're like a chameleon on a box of M&Ms, and you're trying to fit into all these colors. Whereas what's more important is to say, "But who are you? What do you stand for? What is it that are your values?" And then you try and see how can you operate well, sticking to your values in this other environment. Yeah, and you have to obviously adjust and adapt, but you can't go around pretending to be these things. And then to the point that this chap makes, what happens is you get somewhere and then you find out, okay, why am I here? And then unfortunately nothing makes sense.
So what do you think your biggest insight is? So working with us, I mean, I felt you make amazing progress very, very quickly. What was the big insight? How did you get over that hump of being stuck in the kind of career, corporate mindset?
So I think, for me, I'd say 3 or 4 things, Alex. Fundamentally, the benefit of having an objective person to talk to who was interested and engaged, but remained objective was critical. It's critical insight. And I had always felt that I could do this myself and figure it out. And I think that learning that you really benefit by going to speak to the right people and getting that kind of assistance to get you through these periods where you really are stuck and where it's very fundamental, or where you're going through a massive transition. And we can come back to the whole point about just how big of a transition retirement is, because I still felt that I was pretty well prepared, and I still have gone through a lot of kind of upheaval through the last year. But that's the first one. The second insight that I would say is that start as early as you can. It should be part of a deliberate process. And when you're stuck, for sure, then these are the kind of tools that are very useful. But knowing that they're useful, why don't you do them at a point in time where you're even more open to and more flexible around pathways that you can follow. The third insight, I think, is that you start understanding what really matters. And for sure, the one thing that doesn't matter is all the corporate structure and roles and titles and all the things that, whether you say you hang on to them or you don't, the truth is that you do. And you need to break through that and then try and figure out, okay, so take away all of that stuff. It doesn't matter what job you did, but what is it that you actually, as an individual, what is it that you want to do? And that needs, again, this process and some work. And I think the last insight that I would say that was critical for me was that you have to be really purposeful about what it is that you're going to do. You need to really have things that you will actively do, and not as many people sort of, the feeling is you retire with nothing to do, and then you will find stuff to do. And that's fine, but I've done enough of the studies around this to know that can lead to some very bad places, because as I was sharing with you a little earlier, is that if there is no structure to your day and you do nothing, the one big difference when you retire is, since you're on your own, sitting at home, and you don't do anything, there's no consequence for that, or there's no immediate consequence. I think there is a long-term consequence, but there's no immediate. And so doing it again and again becomes too easy. And then there's this frightening statistic which I learned that 50% of American retirees spend more than 47 hours per week in front of a television. And people may think that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you take, as most people don't actually know, there are 168 hours in a week. And if you knock off, let's say, 8 hours a day for sleeping and 2 hours a day for doing other stuff, then you'll realize that 47 as a percent of what's left is a very high proportion.
Yes.
And it's easy to do. It's easy to fall into. So I think the goal is that you should fill up your diary with what you want to do as you retire versus somebody used to fill up your diary. That's the goal. But the diary needs to be full.
Yes.
And that insight is what I think that process showed me, because as I went through the coaching with Shivani, because I was so stuck in the past and wanting to kind of correct all the ills of what people had done to me in the past and needed to get this other corporate job, and she just kept challenging me in a positive way. And when we made the breakthrough of, okay, that clearly isn't what you want to do, actually.
Yes.
And even I knew that. Then it became possible to say, all right, so what is it that then you would like to do?
Yeah.
What would make an interesting day for you?
Yeah.
And so that instead of knowing that you actually have that answer inside yourself, but you need to find it.
Yeah.
That was very critical to the whole process.
Yeah. And it's great to have that confidence from a coach. It's like, well, you can do that. And they have complete confidence in you. And so it's really good. Because when you mentioned that that your boss said to you, by the way, at the end of the meeting, which was quite an interesting way of saying it, I felt like he was a little bit nervous probably about bringing that up. That's why he pushed it to the end, and a by the way. But you mentioned you were shocked, you were anxious, there was some resentment, right? A little bit of anger and frustration. So these are all negative emotions. So there's a lot going on. When the penny dropped during the coaching period and you realized you could do something else, and how did you feel?
Well, I think that's the moment that you become positively engaged in the future and not negatively stuck in the past. Because although I have always prided myself on being this objective, reasonable person who thinks through things and, I'm considered balanced, but I was very guilty of that, getting stuck in the past. And you feel like, or I felt that, this 40-year career, and that somehow this had now been ended in a very, let's call it unpleasant, unfair, whatever term you want to use. But in reality, that wasn't true. I mean, it's corporate life. These things happen. Companies restructure. And as I say, I think your previous guest put it very well, that at some point you get ejected out of an organization.
Yes.
I love that phrase.
Yes.
So that's not the issue. The issue is, okay, but what are you going to do? What is it that you want to do?
Yes.
And when you get focused on that, and when you turn your attention to that, it becomes a very motivating thing, because it's pulling you towards something rather than trying to leave something.
Yeah.
And I've always said it to people when I've coached and mentored people along my life's way, that people want to change jobs. Look, changing jobs is fine, but just make sure that you are really going towards something. Whereas if you say, no, this is really what I want to go towards. And that was why, again, to belabor this point of a process is so important, because this was not like one day during one coaching session that the light shone and then all of a sudden Shivani and I had this, we found the answer. It was a process of bringing me to the realization that actually this is not what I want to do, and in fact this is what I would much rather do.
Yes.
And then the folks, okay, so how are you going to achieve it? How will you actually move towards that? And then suddenly you've actually got a very purposeful goal.
So let's talk about the plan, because I think, I'm not sure, so I last spoke to you about this probably like 6-9 months ago, and I thought it was like one of the best retirement plans ever. I'm not sure if anything's changed, but why don't you tell us what the plan is?
My wife is from Australia, and we had felt that given everything with the children, everyone being not ever having lived in South Africa, we thought going back to South Africa, well, that wouldn't be really a concept. I would be going back to South Africa. Everybody else would be moving to a country. We felt, given where the kids wanted to study and everything, Australia was where we would likely settle. And so notionally we had that, and that was all fine. But then I started having this tremendously uncertain feeling like, this doesn't feel right. I mean, we actually, if the clock stopped today, we don't really have a home. We'd have to go and, I don't know, live in a hotel in Australia. And by the way, can I even just move to Australia? I didn't know. I mean, I'm on a South African passport. So I thought, we probably should kind of at least take some steps that give us some certainty towards that. And so we bought a property, and as it turns out, it was great because that area boomed afterwards. But it wasn't a financial decision. It was more just that knowledge that if everything stopped today, you could actually pack your bags and give the moving company an address and say, yeah, we live there. And it felt very good. So that, in fact, was the only thing we did know. So I think through the process, what I eventually was able to let go of, the one thing I was very much able to let go of, was let go of this obsession with finding another corporate career job somewhere and feeling like I need to go and do these 3 years of work to somehow finish my plan and not feel that I had somehow failed. What was emerging was that coaching was something that could build on all the skills that I had. I'd in fact already qualified as a professional mentor at the time. Okay, so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You've got all this career knowledge. How about if you used that in a sort of consulting advisory kind of role? And that led to some very excellent conversations with some companies that I used to work with in the Middle East who have asked me to come on board as either board advisor or just more generally an advisor to the company. And then that's branched out into some other companies reaching out to me and said, could you help us with either marketing or strategy plan? So I've got the sort of advisory work, I've got the coaching, and I still help out with some mentoring. Yeah.
And are you doing some community work as well, or you were thinking about doing some community work?
Yes, so that the actual work that I discussed with you some time ago will take a little longer because we've delayed our move to the Sunshine Coast, but I'm actually starting up, going through the training shortly to do volunteering exactly in that area where you do essentially mentoring to young people, or in this case, speaking to people that have gone through a major trauma, and where you are using your coaching and mentoring skills to help people work through a difficult period in their life. So I see it as an extension of the coaching and mentoring, but I feel in all things, the one thing I felt that when we move full-time to a place, something I've always had as a need is that you must be involved in community. You don't just ride along as a passenger. You need to give something back.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I used to read books for blind people onto tapes. So this will already tell you when it was. It was a long time ago. It was.
I think it's brilliant because your retirement plan just encompasses all the things actually that I can see myself in different things, but from a similar standpoint. So you're moving to Queensland to live on the beach. Who doesn't want to live on the beach, right?
Exactly.
Bury your feet in the sand every morning. I mean, that's just brilliant. So you've got a super location. You've got some work lined up on your terms, mentoring, coaching, some directorships, helping the businesses. So it's also intellectually challenging.
Absolutely.
And helping people based on your years of experience. So that's fantastic. But getting paid for it. Yep. And then also a community element, a charity element. Using your skills, mentoring a very difficult group of people and helping people makes you feel great.
Absolutely. And
it's
the last,
so beneficial.
Yeah, and the last element, Alex, that I think should not be overlooked, and it's something that, again, as I've gone through the sort of mental strains of just going through the actual adjustment of retiring and disconnecting from 40 years of corporate life, as I've said to many people, the lack of structure is the thing I've struggled with the most. I don't think I feel the sort of attachment to the role per se. That's not what really bothered me. But it's suddenly that there is not that structure to the day and that you've got to try and create that structure yourself. Yeah. And as some roles have taken longer to develop, it's sort of, okay, but how am I productively using my time? And so there would be days where I'd get to the end of the day and think, okay, but I mean, in real life, what have you actually achieved today? And it's not much. And that's not a great feeling. And I've struggled with that a couple of times this year. But the process is still there. I've kept plugging away, and it's now finally coming together. So it does take longer, and hence, back to the point we've made a few times, start earlier because it'll take longer. But yeah, the last part of it is also to then, and it's the thing that I'm now just finally getting on top of, you need to have your own interests and things that keep you interested
Yes.
outside of all of these things, that you don't try and again become a worker by stealth, but that you do, in my case, photography. I'm learning drone photography, playing my guitar again, and just doing those other outlets that have meaning for you. They don't even, they can matter to somebody or they don't, but it matters to you and it's important to you because they're great outlets.
Yes.
You know, if I play the guitar for half an hour, I feel way better than doing anything else.
Yeah, you're flexing your creative side of your brain, which
And you can't. So I think you should fill up your diary. You should do as many things as possible, but make sure that inside of all of that are places, because filling your diary, it's perfectly acceptable to say I've got an hour a day for music or photography. That is a valid thing to fill your diary with, and you now have the time.
Yeah, that's super advice.
Yeah,
and yeah, you make an excellent point, and particularly when we think of people that have been through corporate life. Well, actually, ever since we're born, right, we have a structured life. School is very structured. Maybe university a little bit less so, but then it's straight back into the structured working life, particularly if you work for a big corporate. And then when you're retired, you're basically managing yourself. You're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wonder if entrepreneurs have a slightly easier time of it because they're used to working out what the most important things to do during the day.
They might well, and they're also used to, they come up with the ideas and then act on them, and they didn't have sort of rules that they were following, as it were.
Yeah.
So they might well have an easier time.
But we're talking about 4% of the population,
Correct.
right? Because 96% work for someone.
But I would, even on your point about university, I think anywhere that has a structure, which maybe you can argue that university is more flexible and whatever. Yes, notionally it is, but somebody else is creating deadlines for you and due dates and whatever. I can see it with my daughter.
Yes.
She has a much more flexible study program at her university than I ever did as an engineer, but she has deadlines and projects have to be in. The assessment's going to be in 11:59 on a Sunday. So yeah,
she's still being nannied in a certain way.
You have structure, even if it's not day by day.
Yes. So we'll wrap up now, and I always want to ask everyone at the end, what are your sort of 3 tips looking at health, wellness, mindset, whatever? Obviously, from your side, you very much work on a specific goal, like how to sort of manage the rest of your life. And you gave us those 4, your 4 pieces of advice earlier. But what would you like to say? How would you like to sort of finish?
Well, I think that, a couple of things. One, as your previous guest said, I think very well, definitely take care of your physical health from an early age and on an ongoing basis. Because that will give you a foundation which makes doing a lot of other things much easier and allow you to enjoy more for longer as you get older, because you will have the base strength and conditioning, which is so critical. I mean, there's more than enough papers known now that say resistance-based weight training in your 50s and beyond is the single biggest plus that you can give your body. And with a son who's now studying his master's in performance sports science, he will tell you that chapter and verse. And so I think take care of your base health, because that is also foundational to all the other stuff. So although it sounds strange starting there, I think that is the thing you need to do. So in that same week that you're filling in hours, the time for the gym and walking and just doing physical activity must be there, because then a lot of the other stuff you'll find happens more easily. The second thing is, I think the one big tip is that we've said it a number of times, it's a process, and therefore the earlier you start, the longer you have at this process, and the more you sort of hit the sort of peak output time coinciding with when you are now retiring or transitioning in whichever way it is that you are transitioning. And the last point is that I think if you can get, and you should get, objective assistance, treat this as something that is a fundamental. Some say it's the most stressful transition you will go through is retirement or transitioning out of a corporate life. Definitely get support through a professional coach, because whatever people's views are on coaches and what their role is in life, the most important point is that you need somebody objective, interested but disengaged, to talk through these conversations that you're having with yourself. Because it is remarkable that after many years, 40 years in my case, working in corporate life, it's not that easy to objectively and dispassionately think about what is it that I really want to do, because you keep getting pulled back to what you've done for 40 years. So I think that I think is critical to this thing. Treat it as a really fundamental change and give it the necessary resources to do that.
Yeah, love it. Fantastic tips. So Bill, thanks very much for coming in today.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Great conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
See you.
Thank you.